Hello. Well, I was rototilling my garden this spring, and I found something really interesting. This little black rock, well, now it's kind of like rusty looking, but it was black, and you can see it makes my fingers. And let's come back with, or start with a story. When I was a kid, down in Saddle Mountain in central Washington by Mattawa up north, they were doing lots of testing. They had these thumper trucks and they were putting these mile-long cables all around all these fields and across Saddle Mountain that had every 100 yards or so they had these sensors. And they were doing some electronic thumping on the ground, and those sensors would pick up any oil deposits and stuff like that. And then they drilled 2 wells at the top of Saddle Mountain. And if you look on Google Map or Google Earth, you'll still see them up there, and they're fenced off. But they hit gas. One of them they had burning for about a year. The other one they had burning for about a year and a half. And big flames. You could see those fires 30, 40 miles away. The flames were shooting out of them that high for that long. And then they ended up capping them off and canceling that. But around the same time, there was an article in the newspaper talking about how Governor Gregoire at the time, they were going to build a plant in Oregon that was going to be able to harvest the oil out of these rocks. That is what this is. This is shale oil. And I found it in my garden, and we are 40 miles away from Saddle Mountain. Yes, I was rototilling deep in my garden, and this black rock popped up, and I'm like, pick it up? Like, what is it? Well, let's finish the story. Anyway, Governor Gregoire said she was going to redo the railroad system and all this stuff, and they were going to start drilling or cutting a big path through the middle of that mountain. Because guess what they found? The whole bottom of that thing was shale oil. And that's what they figured, how Saddle Mountain raised up and Rattlesnake Ridge and all that stuff, all those ones down in that area were raised up by natural gas. And we got that basalt layer down there, and they figured all that oil and stuff and all the natural gas was underneath there in massive pockets. And here, let's look at this. Oh, first I'll finish this. I was rototilling in my garden this spring. Found this really cool looking black rock, and it's like really smooth, really interesting. I'm like, oh, that's kind of an interesting looking rock. And I mean, it was just blacker than black. So I got it out, set it up on my table outside, and finished on doing what I was doing. And I come back a little while later and was sitting at my chair right by that, and I kept smelled like petroleum oil. And I'm like, that's weird. I'm like, I don't have any oil sitting around here. And then I looked at the rock, and I sniffed the rock, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the rock itself smells like oil. Huh. And if you look up shale oil, here's the definition of what it looks like when you find it. It is a relatively soft and a smooth, greasy feel when freshly exposed. Exactly how it was when I dug it up. It was greasy, and it just was like it's smooth, and it just like really weird. And then I realized how oily it smelled. But it's hard and brittle when dry. And of course, now it's been sitting outside, exposed to the atmosphere for the last 6 months, so it's gotten a lot harder, and it's rusted. It's got a rust layer on it. Okay, and here we are. What does shale rock feel like? Is what I'm looking at. Most shale split into thin plates or sheets and are termed fizzle, but others are massive, non-fizzle, and break into irregular blocks. Shale weather very easily and form mud and clay. Look at how black my fingers are turning off of this thing. And from all the rust and stuff and the maybe that's just the clay formation that's on it. Check that out. Pretty interesting, huh? You can still smell the petroleum smell, but it's not bursting out like it was before. So we are 40 miles from Saddle Mountain, maybe even farther, and I'm finding shale buried deep in my garden. Shell oil, that is. And if you try to look online to find an article on that, but anyway, the Gregoire thing, she was saying she was going to redo that railroad system, and so they could drill out a big path through the center of that mountain and dig up all that shell oil, take it down there, harvest the oil out of it, run the plant, which was going to be an energy producing plant, and then they were going to ship the rock back up here, and they had a process where it sealed the rock back up, and they were going to dump it back in the hole they dug. Trying to find anything on that is like impossible. You can find stories on there if you search. You really have to search because the government's hidden that stuff. Anything to do with oil, especially in any of these Democrat states, it's been hidden. And like I said, they found that and they burnt those flames were 30, 40 feet high for a year and a half. And then they capped them, and the oil companies all disappeared, all the exploration they were doing around here. And like I said, and then, well, if you look it up, you'll see that several of the really big oil companies were putting money in trying to buy the mineral rights or the gas rights and stuff for the Columbia Basin around Saddle Mountain and down there toward Yakima and stuff, because they were thinking it was going to be the largest natural gas field in the lower 48. And then, but of course, the basalt is such a hard rock, it's really hard to drill through. And of course, boom, that just disappeared. It's amazing it goes from all these oil companies wanting to explore, and the governor sitting there saying in this big article how they were going to redo the train system so they could ship that stuff down there, run that energy plant, and then all of a sudden they got oil conscious, and now you can't even find anything about oil in Washington State or Oregon or California. It's pretty much all hidden, especially the stuff in Washington State. When I was growing up 40 years ago, I seen all that equipment, all that stuff they were going on, them drilling those holes in the top of Saddle Mountain. I seen those flames, and I find a chunk of shell oil 40 miles away, 50 miles away, buried in my garden. That just tells you, because I was tilling deep. I had dug out this big area, so I was probably about 3 feet down. Probably ground that's never been messed with before. So, if there's chunks of this here, and they won't even admit it, that just tells you a lot. And like I said, you really have to search on the internet to find anything about any natural gas. Took a while to find that, where it said how they had put all that money in trying to get the rights to get all that natural gas and stuff. And then that article, I cannot find that article anywhere about, but that was in the 80s, about them wanting to harvest all that shell oil. But I think that's about when all of a sudden the political party decided they wanted to be against oil. Because, keep the populations separated, fighting against each other, keeps them in power, right? Well, here's the piece right here. I mean, you can see, look at my fingers now. They're just getting blacker and blacker from that. And it's got all these really cool, smooth sides, and like I said, when I found it, it just smelled like if you open up a container of oil and smell it. It just smelled just like that. And it was really putting off a fumey smell. So, what do you think about our government and the lies and their cover-ups? Because they sit there and say, if you look online, the Washington State says there is no what do you want to call it? No natural oil deposits or any oil reserves or anything like that in Washington State. Are they trying to keep it hidden from foreign governments? Are they just pushing their political junk and trying to hide the truth? Why would billion-dollar companies want to invest and buy up all the gas rights if it wasn't a real thing? See, that I was able to find online. And then, of course, the article goes on to say that it was, it was too hard to punch through that basalt. But they did it in several spots. And they like I said, they had those massive flames going for 1.5 years on that one. And they had 2 of them dug up there, right on top of Saddle Mountain, right north of Mattawa. About 40 miles, 50 miles north of us. So, interesting, isn't it? So why do you think the government of Washington State and a lot of these states want to hide the truth? I really want to crack this open and see if I can light it on fire. But, of course, I don't want to lose it because there's my proof right there. And buried about 3 feet deep into my garden. Pretty interesting, but it's like a really smooth rock. And you can see it's just a chip off of something, but I think there's a jagged edge right here. But everything else is like glass smooth. Got this little tiny burr right here where it broke off of something else. So I'm almost tempted to get my shovel and see if there's more of this buried in my garden. Pretty interesting though. So let me know in the comments what you guys think and what you think of our government and their lying about everything. Because it's pretty sad when the Washington State government says there's no deposits, but in the 80s they said there was these massive deposits and they were gonna start harvesting all that stuff and start shipping it to Oregon and build a plant down there to create energy, or to burn it to do energy. And then it had some kind of thing where it went into the plant, it burnt the rock, got the oil out, and then it went on through, and in the end of the process the rock gets sealed up, the pores on the rock, and then they were going to ship it back up here. It's funny because I can remember that story from 40 years ago in that whole article on all that, and you cannot find nothing on the internet about that. And if anybody can find a link on that, Saddle Mountain, north of Mattawa, it's about 5 miles north of Mattawa, where it runs right along the Columbia River. Well, from the Columbia River out, and then on the other side is the military reservation, or the military firing range. So if you guys can find anything on that, leave me some links, because I could not find nothing on any of that stuff. But I grew up here in South Central Washington, southeastern, and it's amazing the stuff that we used to know about that just kind of have disappeared. So can you really trust our politicians and our government and news media or anything like that? Because they cover so much stuff up. It's kind of disgusting to see that when you know stuff like that our government actually lies about it. Alright, y'all, leave me some comments if you can find some links to some stuff so I can check that out, because I sure would like to see some more on, well, of course, our government, they sit there and talk about how other governments want to scrub what people can see on the internet and everything else. Our government does it too, people. Our government does it too. Alright. Thanks for watching. Bye.